Okay, Fischer and Shocron of Argentina, Mar del Plata 1959. Bobby Fischer playing the Roy Lopez opening, one that I open with quite a lot these days, not to much effect recently, it has to be said. Going for a bit of a rough patch with chess at the minute. Got to about 1100 and, well, 1100, yeah, around 1100 rating on chess.com, but pretty much everybody I come up against seems to know all my tricks. It tends to happen every so often in my chess.com career. I'll get to a certain level, find it really, really tough for a while, and then all of a sudden I'll start kicking ass. Um, Presumably because I'm getting used to all the new moves, tricks, tactics, strategies, etc. of the opponents. But yeah, the Roy Lopez, to be honest, I've felt that it's been growing a little bit stale recently in my own usage. But anyway, here we go. Fischer against Shocron, Mar del Plata 959. Bobby Fischer opening with the predictable e4 pawn. Shocron replying with the king pawn. This is also something I've been doing recently quite a lot of, so I'm going to be paying particular attention to how he sets his pieces out after the king pawn move. Typical Roy Lopez opening. Fischer moves his knight up to the f3 square, and likewise Shocron brings the knight down to protect his pawn. And typical Roy Lopez style, bishop comes out on the third move, and the pawn comes down to threaten, putting the question. Bishop comes down to a4, and out comes Shocron's knight, also hitting that pawn there, and the minute that's undefended. And Fischer castles, so he's castled within 5 moves there, king safety extremely important obviously. And Shocron looks like he's about to do the same thing with his black squared bishop coming down to e7. And Fischer putting his rook to the left. I'm really going to have to try and emulate this every time. I was emulating it. All these 3 pieces, well, those 2 pieces out, and then the rook across there as soon as castling's finished, grabs this open file. And Shocron pushes on with this pawn, putting this light squared bishop under a bit of pressure here. Moves it down to safety. And Shocron continues to develop his pawn chain. And Fischer brings this pawn up here, hitting that square, maybe trying to deter the knight from landing on d4, and Shocron castles. Fischer pushing this h3 pawn here. Obviously that is attacking that square. Steinitz's rule again, taking away the advanced support squares from the knights. And Shocron decides to put some pressure, extra pressure on Fischer's bishop, effectively putting that bishop out of the game really. Can't go there, can't go there, can't go there because of that, can't go there because of that. But then he finds a way to retreat, bringing it back down into this little cubby hole for the time being. And Shocron pushes on with the pawns. Pawn armada starting to come down this flank here. And up comes Fischer's pawn, d4 pawn up here to draw first blood. Shortly, I expect. Queen comes down, and Fischer brings his last minor piece, bar the black squared bishop, out of the game. And Shocron has slightly, well, I'd say, better development overall here. He's got both bishops developed, queen, 2 knights. Pawns are looking okay as well. No weak pawns there or anything. And Fischer moves his knight over to this square. Now this is the sort of thing you never really see in games on the internet, on chess.com. You never really see people do this. It's all out into the middle, attack, attack, attack. But he's just brought his knight across there. Now I'm sure there's a reason he's done that, but I'm too stupid at the minute, chess-wise, to figure out what it is. And Shocron comes across to also try and take this open file at some point. Knight comes back up, obviously he's wanting to try and get it over here. And the g6 pawn comes down. Now that square is also well and truly off limits. It's got 2 powers acting on the bishop and the pawn. And Fischer draws first blood. The e5 pawn being taken. And Shocron replies, taking the new e5 pawn. Fischer moves his knight over here as well, and once again, this is a very unusual move for somebody who doesn't know much about chess like me. Why he's moving that over there? Presumably, what he's doing basically is getting all his forces onto this flank to attack the king. That's exactly what he's doing. Rook comes across, and the queen comes up. Obviously, he doesn't want to be down there when that light squared bishop decides to make a move. And the bishop comes down naturally to e6, and the knight comes up, putting the question to the other knight, and it's ultimately taken. Fischer takes with his one of his king's defender pawns down there, and the queen of Shocron moves down, hitting this pawn here on e4. Now this is meant to be one of the best moves of the game. It looks to all intents and purposes like he's just giving away a free bishop and giving Shocron a chance to develop his pieces further. But let's see what happens. The knight comes down on this side, threatening Fischer's knight, and he just avoids it completely, sidesteps it, moves it over here, puts it in the line of fire with that bishop there on e6, and the e6 bishop takes, and Fischer takes back with the queen, and now Shocron is beating a bit of a retreat, isn't he? Nothing that knight could do down there really. It was hampered by that dark squared bishop on both of those squares. Over there it can't do anything. Over there, possibly he'd have had the, well, he wouldn't be able to get there in the first place, would he? He'd have had to go up there. That's me talking nonsense. So, yeah, he's had to move that away. He's had to rethink his strategy. A g3 pawn comes up to g3. Down comes the pawn to c4, making a bit of space there, opening that long diagonal, well, that small little diagonal there that the queen could possibly contemplate entering at some point. And Fischer has seen this coming by the looks of things, because he moves his king up, not just moving it out of the way of any potential attack on that diagonal, but also covering these two white squares here. And the same knight is now making its way round to the king's side. Fischer's rook comes across. Look at that, it's really nice, that, isn't it? That really nice long open file there that it's grabbed, hitting that pawn completely. Fischer can move that queen across there and then just get up to the top. I mean, that'd be checkmate, basically. So Shocron has got a little bit of work to do here. He's putting him under a bit of pressure. And the knight continues to make its move around the board. Fischer pushes this pawn up to this side, obviously taking ownership of that c square there, c5 square, and Fischer's queen, Shocron's queen comes across and puts the question to Fischer's queen, but he's not wanting to trade yet, so he comes back down to second rank. Now this is a bit of an unusual move in my opinion. Once he gets that, he's got a pass pawn, hasn't he? So he takes it, and Shocron's not really done much there other than give himself something else to think about. You know, he's going to have to defend that at some point, because it's only 3 squares away from becoming a queen. So he immediately has to bring his queen across to block this pawn, and, you know, possibly take it. But where's that going to leave him? He's going to need to use a couple of tempos to get back into the game there if he takes that. Unless he comes down hard on that pawn there, that's possible. Takes that and then goes down to that pawn, but yeah, that's maybe what he was thinking, I don't know. Fischer moves his dark squared bishop up here, grabbing this diagonal along here, and also supporting the pawn. Well, not really supporting it because he was supporting it before, but grabbing this diagonal, freeing up space down here. He's connected his rooks there, look. And Shocron takes the a5 pawn, and Fischer just simply moves his a2 pawn up to the a4 square, and that's been supported now twice by both the rook and the bishop, so there's absolutely sod all he can do with that queen there now. And so he brings another attacker across, Fischer simply takes the pawn alongside the queen, and the queen is forced to react, and Fischer brings his rook across. A bit of a tense moment here. What's going to develop? The queen beats a retreat, and the rook comes up to threaten the queen, being backed up by this bishop here on this diagonal. And now Fischer is simply chasing Shocron's queen, and the other rook has come up to strengthen this little column here, and inevitably is taken. Fischer retakes, and Shocron moves his rook across to back the queen up there. Immediately Fischer steps his queen up to this square here. Not only is he threatening that, but he's also moving across more into this king side here. And Shocron's knight comes down. Fischer's light squared bishop zips up to a4. Rook comes across to the b file there, and then Fischer's rook comes across, putting a question to the queen, which has of course no choice but to retreat. The rook then moves across to e6, taking the knight there. That's something you seldom see on chess.com, at my level at least. But Shocron doesn't immediately take back. On chess.com, that'd be gone. That'd be seen as a massive mistake. I suppose what it does do is, ultimately, if that pawn is to take the rook, then Fischer's going to have to come across and take that. But obviously, if that's there, he's not going to be able to. But really, it does nothing else but weaken the position of this bishop here. But Fischer's not even thinking about doing that. Look, moves his bishop across, and at this stage, Shocron resigned. Now, very interesting game, that one. Really, I find these games fascinating because, I don't know, maybe it's just a stage in my chess development, but stuff like that, that rook would have been gobbled up, basically. That would have been taken by that straight away, unless there's something here that I'm not seeing. I suppose if he was to take that, well, the queen could come down. Well, let's see what can happen. If he was to, I can't do it. Let's have a look. Play current position, there we go. So just a second, and there we go. Right, so from this position then, what would happen if he took with the pawn? Well, first of all, it would give Fischer the chance to come up here and threaten the king, and where would the king go after this? Well, I don't know, for argument's sake I'm going to say he's going to come to this square. Then what could happen? Well, I don't know, maybe Fischer, could, well, there's not a great deal he can do really, is there, from that position? I'm not too sure. If anybody's got any suggestions, please comment, even though nobody watches these videos apart from me. 50 seconds next to think of what Fischer's next move might have been. Well, in a way, he's put his queen out of the game effectively there, hasn't he? Where's he going to put the queen next? That's why he was a chess master, and I am a chess.com amateur. I suppose he could have moved the bishop up here to threaten the rook. All that would have done is, however, created a bit of a pin with the two bishops. Fischer could have maybe tried to do something like this. Let's just say that the rook takes that.